Zarathel stood in the marriage registry office on Harmony Point Station, her blue crystal skin catching the artificial light. She was nervous, but not for the reasons most brides would be. This was not about love. This was about survival. The Etherian people were dying slowly, not from war or disease, but from their own nature. They were too peaceful, too gentle. In the harsh galaxy of trade and politics, her people always came last. Other species took advantage of their kind hearts and quiet ways. The Etherian homeworld was running out of money and resources. Zarathel had studied the problem for years. Her people needed someone who could think differently, someone whose mind she could not read. The Etherians were telepathic, which meant they often knew what others were thinking. But this gift had become a curse in negotiations. When you could feel the other person's thoughts, it was hard to be tough or demanding. That was why she needed a human. Marcus Chen walked into the office exactly on time. He was average height for a human with dark hair and kind brown eyes. He wore a simple blue suit that looked freshly pressed. Zarathel had been watching him for months, studying his work as a diplomat on the Outer Rim territories. Humans were new to the galaxy. Most alien species thought they were not very important. They had decent technology and could fight when needed, but they were not considered special. What caught Zarathel's attention was how Marcus handled difficult situations. He never raised his voice or lost his temper. He listened carefully and thought before speaking. These were qualities she needed. "Ambassador Zarathel," Marcus said with a small bow. "Thank you for meeting me." "Please, just Zara," she replied. "We should be informal if we are going to be married." They had discussed this arrangement through several meetings. Marcus understood it was not a romance. He was lonely after years of working alone in space, and Zara offered companionship with someone who shared his love of quiet thinking. She needed a partner whose mind she could not peek into, someone who could give her honest advice without the confusion of shared thoughts. The marriage official was a centauri, a species known for their bureaucratic efficiency. He read through the documents quickly, asking the required questions. Did they both agree to this union? Yes. Did they understand the legal responsibilities? Yes. Were they entering this marriage freely? Yes, the ceremony was simple. They signed papers and exchanged rings. Marcus had chosen a traditional gold band. Zara's ring was made from Etherian crystal that glowed softly blue. When they kissed, it was gentle and respectful, like shaking hands. "So," Marcus said as they walked through the station corridors afterward, "what happens now?" "Now we learn to live together," Zara replied. "I have arranged quarters for us on level 7. They have a garden dome where you can grow earth plants if you wish." Marcus smiled. "I would like that very much." Their new home was larger than either had lived in before. The main room had windows that looked out into space, showing the stars and passing ships. The garden dome was attached to the side with artificial sunlight and rich soil. Zara had already begun growing some Etherian crystal flowers there. The first weeks were awkward but pleasant. They were like roommates learning each other's habits. Marcus woke early and made coffee, a human drink that Zara found too bitter. She meditated at sunrise, sitting very still while her crystal skin absorbed the light. Marcus learned to be quiet during these times. Evenings were spent reading or talking. Marcus enjoyed human philosophy books while Zara studied trade agreements and political theory. Sometimes they would discuss what they had read, sharing different viewpoints. Marcus found Zara's telepathic insights fascinating. She was amazed by how humans could hold completely opposite ideas in their minds at the same time without discomfort. "Your species is very strange," she told him one night as they sat in the garden. "You can believe something strongly while also doubting it. How do you function with such contradiction?" Marcus thought about this while watering his tomato plants. Maybe that's what makes us adaptable. We can change our minds when we get new information. We don't have to be certain about everything. Zara nodded slowly. This was exactly the kind of thinking her people needed. The first test of their partnership came when Zara was asked to negotiate a mining contract with the Volak Consortium. The Volak were aggressive traders who had cheated the Etherians many times before. Zara had always failed against them because she could sense their greed and contempt, which made her too uncomfortable to push back. "Tell me about these Volak," Marcus said as they prepared for the meeting. Zara explained how the Volak thought the Etherians were weak and stupid. They would make unfair offers and refuse to budge, knowing the Etherians would eventually give in to avoid conflict. "What do you want from this deal?" Marcus asked. "Fair payment for our crystal exports. 30 credits per ton is reasonable. What will they offer? Probably 15. Maybe 20 if we are lucky. Marcus sat quietly for a long time. Then he said, "What if we walked away?" Zara was shocked. "Walk away? But we need the money. Do we need it more than they need our crystals?" This was a new way of thinking for Zara. Her people always focused on their own needs and desperation. They never considered that the other side might be desperate too. The meeting with the Volak went differently than usual. Zara presented their offer, and the Volak representative, a large reptilian creature named Hask, immediately countered with 18 credits per ton. "That is not acceptable," Zara said, following Marcus's advice. "We require 30 credits per ton or we will find another buyer." Hask laughed, showing his sharp teeth. "You Etherians always say that, but you never leave. You need us more than we need you." Zara felt the familiar wave of discomfort from sensing Hask's cruel amusement. But she also felt Marcus's calm presence beside her. He could not send thoughts, but his steady breathing and relaxed posture gave her strength. "You are wrong," Zara said. "We have 3 other buyers interested in our crystals. This is our final offer." She stood to leave. Marcus followed. They were halfway to the door when Hask called out, "Wait! Perhaps we can discuss 25 credits per ton." They settled on 28 credits, the best deal the Etherians had gotten in years. As they walked back to their quarters, Zara felt something she had never experienced before. Pride in being tough. "How did you know they would call us back?" she asked Marcus. "I watched how Hask looked at the crystal samples you brought. He wanted them badly. Sometimes the person who wants something less has more power." That night Zara sat in her meditation pose, but instead of clearing her mind, she thought about her husband. He was not what she had expected. She had married him for his calmness and his unreadable thoughts. But there was something else about Marcus, something deeper she could not quite understand. When she looked at him reading in his chair, she sometimes caught a glimpse of intensity in his eyes. Not anger or aggression, but something fierce and protective. When she asked him about it, he always gave simple answers. "I care about our life together," he would say. "I want to keep it safe." Zara did not understand what he meant by safe. They lived on a peaceful station in neutral space. There were no dangers here. But something in Marcus's voice made her believe that if danger ever came, he would know what to do. For now, she was content with their quiet life and their growing success as partners. She had found the peace she wanted, and Marcus seemed happy too. Neither of them knew that their peaceful existence was about to be tested in ways they could never imagine. 6 months had passed since the wedding, and life had settled into a comfortable rhythm. Marcus woke each morning before the artificial sunrise and tended to his garden. He had managed to grow tomatoes, lettuce, and even some roses from earth seeds. The sight of familiar plants growing in alien soil always made him smile. Zara would join him after her morning meditation, bringing 2 cups of the herbal tea she preferred. They would walk through the small garden together, Marcus explaining how each plant was doing while Zara shared news from her morning communications with the Etherian Council. "The Council is pleased with our recent successes," she told him one morning as they watched his roses bloom. 3 successful trade agreements in 6 months. They are calling it the best period of Etherian commerce in decades. Marcus nodded while pruning a rosebush. "The crystal art sales to the Andorian colonies went well. Better than expected. Your suggestion to market them as meditation aids instead of just decorations was brilliant." The Andorians paid triple the usual price. This had become their pattern. Zara would handle the formal negotiations, but Marcus would offer insights that helped her understand what the other species really wanted. His human perspective, free from telepathic assumptions, often revealed motivations that Zara's people missed completely. The Volak mining deal had been just the beginning. Word spread through the diplomatic community that the Etherian ambassador had somehow become much more effective. Species that had ignored her people before were now requesting meetings. Marcus found these successes rewarding, but what he enjoyed most were the quiet evenings with Zara. She was teaching him Etherian meditation techniques, showing him how to find stillness in his mind. In return, he shared human music and literature with her. She was particularly fascinated by human poetry, which expressed emotions in ways her telepathic people rarely needed to. "This poem by Robert Frost," she said one evening, reading from Marcus's tablet.
"He writes about 2 paths in a forest."
"But he is not really talking about paths, is he?"
"No," Marcus agreed.
He is talking about choices and how they shape our lives. Your people are very complex. You say one thing but mean another thing, and somehow this makes the meaning deeper. Marcus considered this. Maybe because we cannot read each other's minds, we had to find other ways to communicate feelings. Poetry, music, art. We had to get creative. Zara set down the tablet and looked at him. Is that why you agreed to marry me? For creativity? The question surprised Marcus. He had been watering his tomato plants and paused, the watering can still in his hand. I married you because you seemed like someone I could build something good with. And because you were lonely too. I was not lonely, Zara said quickly. I was focused on solving my people's problems. Those can be the same thing, Marcus replied gently. Zara was quiet for a long moment. Marcus had learned to recognize her thinking poses. She would tilt her head slightly and her crystal skin would dim as she turned her attention inward. I have been alone for a long time, she finally admitted. Even surrounded by my people, their thoughts mixing with mine, I felt alone. And now I feel settled. Like I have found something I did not know I was looking for. Marcus smiled and continued watering his plants. I feel the same way. Their partnership was attracting attention beyond just trade deals. Other species were beginning to request their mediation services for disputes. The Centauri Banking Guild asked them to help resolve a payment disagreement with the Rigelian merchants. A territorial dispute between two minor systems wanted their input. Marcus found he was good at this work. His years of diplomatic training had taught him to listen carefully and find common ground. But working with Zara had taught him something new. Her telepathic abilities, combined with his resistance to them, created a unique advantage. She could sense when other parties were being dishonest or hiding important information, while his perspective helped her understand the cultural context behind their motivations. You are becoming famous, Zara told him after they successfully mediated the Centauri-Rigelian dispute. The other human diplomats are asking how you do it. What do you tell them? That I married well, Marcus laughed. It was a warm sound that filled their small quarters. Zara had learned to love that laugh. It was completely genuine, free from the careful calculation that telepaths often felt in each other's emotions. One evening, as they sat reading in their living room, Zara noticed Marcus staring out the window with an expression she had seen before, but never understood. His eyes were focused on something far away, and there was an intensity in his face that seemed at odds with his usual calm demeanor. What are you thinking about? She asked. Marcus blinked and looked back at her. Just watching the ships come and go, wondering about the people on them. You look worried. Not worried exactly, just aware. Zara tried to probe deeper into his meaning, but his mind remained as unreadable as always. This had initially been frustrating for her, but she had grown to appreciate it. There was something exciting about being with someone whose thoughts were a mystery. Aware of what? Marcus was quiet for a long moment. There are a lot of different kinds of ships out there, Zara. Some carry families moving to new homes. Some carry trade goods between worlds. But some carry people who are looking for opportunities to take advantage of others. This is a neutral station. We are safe here. Safe is not a permanent condition, Marcus said. It is something that has to be maintained. This was the kind of comment that puzzled Zara. Marcus often spoke as if danger was always lurking nearby, ready to appear at any moment. But their life was peaceful. The worst thing that happened in their daily routine was when the station's food replicator produced coffee that was too weak for Marcus's taste. You humans see threats everywhere, she said. It must be exhausting. We see possibilities everywhere, Marcus corrected. Most of them are good, but it is the bad ones that require preparation. Preparation for what? Marcus looked at her with those intense eyes again. For whatever might threaten the things we care about. Zara felt a small shiver run through her crystal skin. There was something in Marcus's voice when he said this that was different from his usual gentle tone. It was not threatening or angry. It was something else entirely. Something that spoke of depth she had not yet explored. But before she could ask more questions, Marcus stood and stretched. I think I will make some tea before bed. Would you like some? The moment passed and Marcus was back to his normal, caring self. But Zara remembered the feeling. There was more to her husband than the quiet diplomat she had married. She was beginning to understand that his peaceful nature was not an absence of strength. but perhaps strength under very careful control. That night, as they lay in their separate beds on either side of their shared quarters, Zara thought about the past 6 months. She had married Marcus for practical reasons, but something had grown between them that was more than just partnership. She cared about his happiness. She looked forward to their conversations. She felt protective of their quiet life together. She wondered if this was what humans called love. The emotion was different from what she had expected. It was not the passionate fire described in human poetry, but something steadier and deeper, like the warmth from Marcus's garden on a cold station night. As she drifted off to sleep, Zara felt grateful for her decision to marry a human. Marcus had given her exactly what she had hoped for: peace, partnership, and success. She had no way of knowing that this peaceful life they had built together was about to be tested in ways that would reveal just how far her gentle husband would go to protect it. The warning came during breakfast. Marcus was reading the daily station reports while Zara prepared her morning tea, when her communication device chimed with an urgent message from the Etherian Council. "What is it?" Marcus asked, seeing her crystal skin pale to a worried blue. "The Korthak hegemony has requested a meeting with me," Zara said, her voice tight with anxiety. "They are sending a delegation to Harmony Point." Marcus set down his tablet. He knew about the Korthak. They were a militaristic empire that expanded through what they called economic negotiations, but what others recognized as barely disguised extortion. They would target species they perceived as weak, making demands backed by implied threats of force. "What do they want?" he asked. "They say they wish to discuss trade opportunities in our territory." Zara's hands trembled slightly as she read the message. "But I know what this really means. They want to take control of our new trade routes." The success that Marcus and Zara had built over the past months had not gone unnoticed. The Etherian crystal trade had become profitable again, and their mediation services were generating significant income. This prosperity had made them visible to predators like the Korthak. "When are they arriving?" Marcus asked. "Tomorrow." Zara looked at him with fear in her large silver eyes. "Marcus, my people have never been able to stand up to the Korthak. They are too aggressive, too willing to use violence. Every time we have dealt with them, we have lost." Marcus stood and moved to the window, looking out at the peaceful station traffic. A cargo ship was docking at the commercial port, probably carrying supplies for the various species that called Harmony Point home. Everything looked normal, but he could feel something changing in the air. "Tell me everything you know about them," he said. For the next several hours, Zara briefed Marcus on Korthak methods. They were reptilian humanoids, larger and stronger than most species. Their culture valued dominance and viewed diplomacy as a form of warfare. They rarely made direct military attacks, preferring to use economic pressure and intimidation to force compliance. "Their leader is Warlord Thaxmore," Zara explained. "He has been expanding Korthak influence throughout this sector for the past 5 years. He never asks for anything he is not prepared to take by force." Marcus listened carefully, asking detailed questions about Korthak psychology, their political structure, and their military capabilities. Zara was surprised by how quickly he absorbed the information and how strategic his questions were. "Have you studied military tactics before?" she asked. "I study everything that might affect the safety of people I care about," Marcus replied simply. That evening, Marcus spent hours at his personal computer. Zara assumed he was researching Korthak history, but when she tried to look over his shoulder, he gently closed the screen. "Just preparing," he said. "Try to get some rest. Tomorrow will be difficult." The Korthak delegation arrived with unnecessary ceremony. 3 large ships declocked near the station, their dark metal hulls bristling with weapon arrays that were technically legal in neutral space, but clearly intended to intimidate. Warlord Thaxmore came aboard with a full honor guard of armored warriors. Zara met them in the station's formal conference room, with Marcus at her side. Thaxmore was even more imposing in person than his reputation suggested. He stood nearly 8 feet tall, his scaled hide scarred from what were presumably ritual combat marks. His eyes were cold yellow, and when he spoke, his voice carried the authority of someone accustomed to immediate obedience. "Ambassador Zarathel," he rumbled, deliberately mispronouncing her name. "I have come to discuss the future of Etherian trade in this sector." "We welcome the opportunity for discussion," Zara replied, falling back on diplomatic training. Perhaps we can find mutually beneficial arrangements. Taxmore's laugh was like rocks grinding together. Mutual benefit. Yes, let us discuss that. He gestured to one of his aides, who activated a holographic display showing star charts of the region. The Korthak hegemony requires access to the trade routes currently controlled by your people, Taxmore said without preamble. You will transfer administrative authority to us, and we will ensure the continued flow of commerce. That is not possible, Zara said, though her voice lacked conviction. These routes have been Etherian territory for centuries. Territory belongs to those with the strength to defend it, Taxmore replied. Your recent success has been noted, but it is built on foundations of weakness. One strong push and it will all collapse. Marcus had remained silent during this exchange, but Zara could sense a subtle shift in his posture. He was sitting very still, his hands folded calmly in his lap, but there was something different about his breathing. It had become deeper, more controlled. What exactly are you proposing? Zara asked, trying to buy time to think. You will cede control of your primary trade routes to Korthak administration. In return, we will allow your people to continue operating as junior partners, retaining 30% of current revenues. 30%? Zara felt anger rising despite her peaceful nature. You want to take 70% of our income in exchange for protection we do not need? Taxmore leaned forward, his massive frame casting a shadow over the conference table. Need is determined by circumstances, Ambassador. Circumstances can change very quickly. The threat was unmistakable. Zara felt the familiar wave of telepathic pressure from Taxmore's mind, a roiling mass of dominance and contempt. He saw her as prey, weak and defenseless. The intensity of his predatory thoughts made her physically nauseous. I need time to consult with my government, she said weakly. Time is a luxury for species with options, Taxmore replied. You have until tomorrow to provide your answer. I trust you will make the wise choice. As the negotiations continued, Taxmore became increasingly aggressive. He made pointed references to the unfortunate accidents that sometimes befell trading ships in unsecured space. He mentioned how administrative errors could suddenly make life difficult for stations that harbored uncooperative parties. But it was his personal comments that finally crossed the line. When Zara tried once more to suggest a compromise that would preserve Etherian autonomy, Taxmore's eyes fixed on her with predatory interest. You know, Ambassador, I am curious about your choice in companions, he said, glancing dismissively at Marcus. The Korthak have long admired Etherian crystal work. Perhaps in my personal collection, you could demonstrate the finer points of your people's artistry. The sexual threat was clear enough to make Zara recoil, but it was Marcus's reaction that stunned her. For the first time since she had known him, she felt his mind become completely closed to her telepathic senses. It was as if a steel door had slammed shut in his thoughts. She looked at her husband and saw a transformation that took her breath away. Marcus had not moved from his chair, but something fundamental had changed. His kind brown eyes had become hard and calculating. His relaxed posture had shifted into something that reminded her of a predator preparing to strike. When Marcus spoke, his voice carried a quality that made even the heavily armed Korthak guards take an unconscious step backward. Warlord Taxmore, Marcus said with perfect calm, I believe there has been a misunderstanding about who you are dealing with. Taxmore turned his attention to Marcus for the first time, clearly surprised that the insignificant human would dare to speak. What did you say, little man? Marcus stood slowly, his movement deliberate and controlled. Though he was less than half Taxmore's size, something about his presence seemed to fill the room. I said you have made a mistake, Marcus replied. You assumed you were negotiating with someone who had no choice but to submit to your demands. You were wrong. For the first time since the meeting began, uncertainty flickered in Taxmore's yellow eyes. This human was not reacting the way victims were supposed to react. You threaten my wife, Marcus continued, his voice never rising above conversational level. You insult her people and make crude suggestions about her future. This tells me you do not understand the situation you have created. What situation? Taxmore demanded, but his voice carried less confidence than before. Marcus smiled, and Zara felt a chill run through her crystal skin. She had never seen that particular expression on her husband's face before. It was not cruel or angry. It was something far more dangerous. It was the smile of someone who knew exactly what they were going to do next. The situation where a human decides that someone needs to be taught better manners, Marcus said softly. The room fell silent except for the hum of the station's life support systems. Zara stared at her husband, seeing him clearly for the first time. The gentle diplomat she had married was still there, but underneath was something she had never suspected. Something that had been waiting patiently for the moment when it would be needed. Thaxmore rose to his full height, towering over Marcus. "You dare threaten me, human?" "I do not make threats," Marcus replied calmly. "I make statements of fact. And the fact is that you have just made the worst mistake of your very long life." The silence in the conference room stretched for several heartbeats. Thaxmore stared down at Marcus, clearly expecting the human to back down or show fear. Instead, Marcus reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out what appeared to be a simple data pad. "Before we continue this conversation," Marcus said, his voice remaining perfectly calm, "I think you should review some information." He activated the device and placed it on the conference table. A holographic display showed what looked like legal documents and star charts. Thaxmore glanced at it dismissively, but as he read, his expression began to change. "According to Galactic Trade Regulation 1247, Marcus said, reading from the documents, any military fleet that enters neutral space under false diplomatic pretenses while carrying weapons above defensive specifications is considered to be engaging in piracy." Thaxmore's eyes narrowed. "What are you talking about, human?" "Your ships, Warlord. I ran a detailed scan when you arrived. The weapon arrays you are carrying exceed defensive limits by approximately 300%. That makes your presence here illegal under 17 different galactic treaties." Marcus touched the pad again, and new documents appeared. "Furthermore, your demands for territorial concessions backed by implied force constitute extortion under the Neutral Space Protection Act. The penalty for extortion in neutral space is immediate seizure of assets and criminal prosecution. You think your pathetic laws will protect you?" Thaxmore snarled, but Zara could sense uncertainty creeping into his thoughts. "Oh, I am not relying on laws to protect me," Marcus replied with that same unsettling smile. "I am simply establishing the legal framework for what happens next." Marcus stood and walked to the conference room's main display. With a few keystrokes, he brought up a communication interface. "Computer, open a secure channel to the human naval command vessel Intrepid." Zara felt her crystal skin go completely pale. She had no idea Marcus had been in contact with human military forces. Neither apparently did Thaxmore, whose confident posture faltered slightly. The display activated, showing the bridge of what was clearly a warship. A woman in a crisp blue uniform appeared on the screen. She had short gray hair and the kind of steady eyes that came from years of command experience. "Admiral Sarah Chen reporting," she said. "Hello, little brother." Marcus nodded to the woman on the screen. "Admiral, we have a situation here that requires your attention." Thaxmore stared at the display, then at Marcus. "Your sister is a military commander?" "Admiral Chen is the commanding officer of the 3rd Human Defense Fleet," Marcus replied. "She has been monitoring this situation for the past week." The woman on the screen smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. "Warlord Thaxmore, I presume. We have been looking forward to meeting you." "This is neutral space," Thaxmore protested. "Human military forces have no authority here." "Actually," Admiral Chen said, consulting a datapad of her own, "the Neutral Space Protection Act gives any signatory species the right to respond to acts of piracy and extortion. Since your actions clearly fall under both categories, we are legally authorized to take action." Marcus walked to the conference room's windows and gestured outside. "Computer, decloak the escort vessels." What happened next would become legendary throughout the galaxy. Ships began appearing in space around Harmony Point, their cloaking fields dropping away to reveal a human fleet that had been waiting in perfect silence. But these were not the small patrol vessels that other species expected from humanity. The ships that materialized were massive, sleek vessels that seemed to flow through space like living things. Their design was unlike anything in the galactic fleet architectures that most species used. Where other ships were built for conquest and territorial expansion, these vessels radiated a different philosophy entirely. They were built for protection. 12 heavy cruisers, 6 destroyers, and a command carrier, Admiral Chen reported, all fully armed and ready to respond to hostile action. Thaxmore stared out the window at the human fleet, his reptilian features showing confusion as much as fear. "This is impossible. Humans are a minor species. You do not have this kind of military capability. Marcus turned back to face the Korthak delegation. That is what we wanted you to think. You see, Warlord, humans learned long ago that the best defense is often to be underestimated by your enemies. But why? Zara asked, finding her voice for the first time since the fleet appeared. Why hide such power? Marcus looked at his wife with gentle eyes that still carried that dangerous intensity. Because we did not want power for its own sake. We wanted peace, but we learned that sometimes peace has to be defended. Admiral Chen's voice came from the display. Warlord Thaxmore, you now have a choice. You can return to your territory and never threaten peaceful species again, or you can test whether human defensive capabilities are as impressive as they appear. You would start a war over trade routes? Thaxmore demanded. Marcus stepped closer to the massive alien, and despite the size difference, it was Thaxmore who stepped back. We would start a war over someone threatening our family, Marcus said quietly. And Zara is my family. The words hit Zara like a physical blow. She had married Marcus for practical reasons, but he had clearly come to see their union as something much deeper. The protection he was offering was not political or strategic. It was personal. You humans are insane, Thaxmore said, but his voice lacked conviction. No, Marcus replied. We are protective. There is a difference. Admiral Chen spoke again. Warlord, I am uploading detailed tactical analyses of your fleet composition, weapon capabilities, and defensive systems to your personal datapad. I want you to review them carefully. Thaxmore's aide handed him a device that had just received the transmission. As he read, his expression changed from anger to disbelief to something approaching terror. How do you know our classified military specifications? He whispered. Because we have been studying you for years, Marcus said. Every ship design, every tactical doctrine, every weakness in your command structure. We know how you think, how you fight, and how to defeat you. Marcus activated his own datapad again. Your flagship, the Dominance. Built 12 years ago at the Korthak military shipyards. Crew of 800. Primary weapons are plasma cannons with a range of 50,000 kilometers. Defensive shields rated for Class 7 energy attacks. He looked up at Thaxmore. Our destroyers carry weapons rated at Class 12. Our shields can deflect Class 15 attacks. Your entire fleet could not damage a single one of our cruisers. Impossible, Thaxmore said, but he was already looking at his tactical display, confirming Marcus's claims. We do not want to fight you, Marcus continued. Fighting is wasteful and causes unnecessary suffering. But if you force us to choose between your survival and the safety of people we protect, that choice is already made. Zara watched her husband with amazement. This was still the same gentleman who grew roses in their garden and made her tea in the mornings. But she was seeing the other side of human nature, the side that had allowed them to survive and thrive in a dangerous universe. What do you want? Thaxmore asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I want you to leave this station, Marcus said. I want you to return to your territory and never threaten peaceful species again. I want you to understand that humans do not conquer for territory or resources. We protect what we love, and we are very, very good at it. Admiral Chen's voice cut through the tension. Warlord, you have 60 seconds to begin departure procedures. After that, we will consider your continued presence an act of aggression. Thaxmore looked around the room at his guards, at the human fleet visible through the windows, at Marcus standing calmly beside his Etherian wife. For the first time in his long career of intimidation and conquest, he was facing an opponent who was not afraid of him. This is not over, he said, but it was the protest of someone who knew they had already lost. Yes, it is, Marcus replied simply. You just do not realize it yet. Thaxmore and his delegation left the conference room without another word. Within minutes, the Korthak ships were powering up their engines and departing Harmony Point. They did not decloak any hidden vessels or make any threatening gestures. They simply left. As the last Korthak ship disappeared into hyperspace, Admiral Chen appeared on the display again. Nice work, little brother. Same time next week for family dinner? Marcus laughed, and the sound broke the tension that had filled the room. I think Zara and I will be busy for a while, but thank you, Sarah. Anytime. That is what family is for. The display went dark, leaving Marcus and Zara alone in the conference room. Outside, the human fleet was already beginning to cloak again, fading back into invisibility as if they had never been there. Zara stared at her husband, seeing him with completely new eyes. Who are you? She whispered. Marcus walked over to her and took her hands in his. I am exactly who I have always been, a man who wants to build something good with someone he cares about. The difference is, now you know how far I'm willing to go to protect it. The news of what happened at Harmony Point spread through the galaxy faster than any ship could travel. Within days, every species with a functioning communication network had heard some version of the story. A minor human diplomat had faced down the Korthak hegemony and won without firing a single shot. But the details that emerged painted a picture that shocked the galactic community. Humans were not the peaceful, unremarkable species they had appeared to be. They had been quietly building a defensive capability that exceeded most established powers, while maintaining the appearance of harmless newcomers. Zara sat in their garden 3 days after the confrontation, watching Marcus tend to his roses as if nothing had changed. But everything had changed, and she was still struggling to understand how she had missed so many signs. How long have you been in contact with your sister's fleet? She asked. Marcus looked up from pruning a yellow rosebush. Since our 3rd week of marriage. When I realized that our success might make us a target. You planned all of this? I prepared for possibilities, Marcus corrected. There is a difference between planning and preparation. Planning assumes you know what will happen. Preparation means being ready for whatever might happen. Zara tried to absorb this distinction. So you expected the Korthak to come? I expected someone like them to come eventually. Our success was making too much noise to go unnoticed forever. Marcus set down his pruning shears and sat beside her on the garden bench. Powerful predators always notice when prey animals start thriving. Is that what we are to you? Prey animals? Marcus turned to look at her, and she saw the same intensity in his eyes that she had glimpsed before but never understood. No, Zara, you are family. That makes all the difference. Over the following weeks, Zara learned more about the husband she thought she knew. Marcus had not just been preparing for trouble with the Korthak. He had been studying every potential threat to their peaceful life, from pirates to political extremists to economic predators. You know about the Centauri Banking Guild's connections to the slave trade, she said one evening, reading through files on his personal computer that he had finally allowed her to access. I know they have been using debt manipulation to acquire indentured servants from desperate species, Marcus replied. I also know they have been considering approaching the Etherians with predatory loan offers. And the Rigelian merchants? Money laundering operation for at least 3 criminal organizations. They were planning to use our mediation services as cover for legitimizing illegal transactions. Zara stared at the screen, overwhelmed by the scope of information Marcus had gathered. How did you learn all of this? I asked my sister to have human intelligence services investigate everyone we were doing business with. It is standard procedure when establishing new diplomatic relationships. Standard procedure, Zara repeated. Marcus, most species do not have intelligence services this comprehensive. How long has humanity been gathering this kind of information? Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Since we first encountered other species in the galaxy, we learned early that information is the best defense against those who would take advantage of others. The revelation that humanity had been conducting galaxy-wide intelligence operations while maintaining a facade of innocent newcomers sent shockwaves through the diplomatic community, but it was the philosophical implications that truly changed how other species viewed humans. Ambassador Yextai of the Centauri Banking Guild requested a meeting with Marcus and Zara a week after the Korthak incident. The Centauri was a tall, thin being with multiple arms and compound eyes that could focus on several things simultaneously. We wish to clarify our business relationship, Yextai said carefully. There may have been some misunderstandings about our intentions. Marcus smiled politely. I am sure there have been. Perhaps you could explain your understanding of our relationship? We see great potential for mutually beneficial financial arrangements with the Etherian people. We could offer development loans at very reasonable rates. What rates? Zara asked. Only 12% annually with flexible repayment terms. Marcus pulled out his data pad and showed Yextai something that made the Centauri's compound eyes widen in alarm. According to our analysis, 12% annually on the loan, amounts you are suggesting would result in the Etherians owing approximately 4 times their planetary gross income within 10 years. Yextai's multiple arms fidgeted nervously. Perhaps we could discuss more favorable terms. I have a better suggestion, Marcus said. The Etherian government will establish their own financial institutions with human assistance. We will provide technical expertise and initial funding at 0% interest. In return, the Etherians will share a percentage of profits from their crystal trade. But that would eliminate our entire business model, Yextai protested. Yes, Marcus agreed. That is the point. News of this exchange also spread quickly. Humans were not just defending their allies militarily. They were restructuring the economic relationships that predatory species had used to exploit weaker civilizations. TQ. Rigelian merchants attempted to salvage their money laundering scheme by offering Marcus a substantial bribe to overlook their illegal activities. Marcus recorded the conversation and forwarded it to galactic law enforcement agencies. Within a month, the Rigelian leadership was under investigation by 12 different star systems. You are making enemies, Zara warned him as they watched news reports about the expanding corruption investigations. I am making it clear that there are consequences for threatening what I care about, Marcus replied. There is a difference. But the most significant change was in how other species began approaching humanity for assistance. The Volak Consortium, which had previously cheated the Etherians in trade deals, sent a delegation requesting human mediation for their own territorial disputes. The Andorian colonies asked for human advisors to help them resist economic pressure from larger powers. Even species that had been suspicious of human motives began reaching out. The Cathara Collective, a group of insectoid species that had been isolationist for centuries, sent ambassadors to discuss defensive alliances. They all want the same thing, Zara observed as they reviewed the requests pouring in. Protection. Protection and partnership, Marcus corrected. We are not offering to fight their battles for them. We are offering to teach them how to fight their own battles more effectively. This distinction became the foundation of what historians would later call the human protection doctrine. Humans did not seek to conquer or control other species. They sought to create a galaxy where peaceful civilizations could thrive without fear of predators. 6 months after the Korthak incident, Marcus and Zara stood in their garden watching the sunset through the station's viewport. The space around Harmony Point was busier than ever, filled with ships from dozens of species coming for trade, mediation, or simply to meet the humans who had changed the balance of galactic power. I married you for tranquility, Zara said, echoing words she had spoken months earlier. I thought I was choosing peace over passion. Marcus continued watering his roses, which had grown larger and more beautiful than ever in the station's artificial environment. You did choose peace, but you also chose someone who was willing to fight for it. I understand that now, Zara said, but I still do not understand how you can be both gentle and dangerous at the same time. Marcus set down the watering can and took her hands in his. Because gentleness is not weakness, Zara. It is strength under control. The capacity for violence makes peace meaningful. Anyone can avoid conflict when they have no choice. Choosing peace when you could choose war, that is what makes it real. Zara looked into her husband's eyes and finally understood what she had been seeing there all along. It was not banked anger or hidden aggression. It was love. Love so fierce and protective that it would reshape reality to keep what it cherished safe. The other species are calling us the human peace, she said. They say that wherever humans go, predators retreat and peaceful species flourish. Good, Marcus said simply. That was always the goal. As the artificial stars began to appear in the station's night cycle, Zara reflected on how much her life had changed. She had sought a marriage of convenience and found a love deeper than anything in Etherian poetry. She had wanted a partner who could help her people survive and discovered an ally who could help them thrive. Most importantly, she had learned that true strength was not the ability to dominate others, but the willingness to protect what mattered. Marcus had shown her that the greatest power in the galaxy was not found in weapons or fleets, but in the simple human decision to stand up and say, no further. Their garden was peaceful in the artificial twilight, filled with the scent of earth roses and the soft glow of Etherian crystal flowers growing side by side. It was a perfect symbol of what they had built together, beauty created through the union of different strengths, protected by the quiet determination of someone who would do anything to keep it safe. In the distance, barely visible against the stars, the running lights of human patrol ships moved in their endless circuits around the station. They were no longer hidden, no longer pretending to be weak. The galaxy now knew what humans were capable of when someone threatened what they loved.